Good news everyone! Cinema DNG is finally here for the Shogun Inferno, and the Shogun Flame. I'm gonna talk about some possible workflows and some do's and don'ts. I have one of those tricky Swedish names, Andreas Fernbrandt, and I'm a Sony European DI ambassador. For those of you who don't know, Cinema DNG gives you 12-bit RAW from the Sony FS series cameras. It's a sequence of individual images and it will allow for greater flexibility in post-production. One of the best benefits with shooting Cinema DNG is the ability to do white balance in post. It also gives you very fine control over noise reduction and debayering. It also allows you to go to a different codec, or if you do a lot of chroma key work, the lack of compression will also be beneficial for you. However, there might be times when you will be better off shooting to ProRes or Avid DNX. Shooting to Cinema DNG will add additional steps in post-production, and it's also recommended that you're comfortable using post-processing software if you want to get the most out of your files. It's worth noting that I'm currently on a beta version on my Shogun, so things might actually change from now until when you guys see this video. Let's see what we got. I had a personal interest in seeing how some different debayers would perform, so I want to examine my shots to see if I can notice any debayering artifacts. In all cameras that doesn't shoot RAW, you would get the built-in debayer and you really don't have much choice. Debayer quality will affect the overall image quality even if it's on a small level. It's important to understand that there is a correlation between speed and quality. If you need to debayer things in real time, you need the speed. This doesn't mean that things will turn out bad, it just means that us pixel peepers might find a small difference. I got this shot at my local nature reserve and it will be our test for today. I have 3 different versions. One is the DNG file processed through Resolve, one is the native ProRes from the Shogun, and one is the DNG file processed through Adobe Camera Raw. The file processed through Resolve seemed to be free from any major debayering artifacts, but with the default settings, it seemed to have a small hit to the sharpness. The native Shogun looks sharp, but it does have some debayering artifacts in this contrasty area. It's important to remember that its main focus is to be a real-time debayer. Looking at the file coming from Adobe Camera Raw, it's clear that it's the best out of the 3. But again, the Adobe Camera Raw debayer focuses on quality and not the speed. It's definitely the slowest workflow out of the 3. Let's head on over to Resolve and see what we can get out of this image. It's worth noting that there might be many ways you can achieve the look you want in the post-production, but this is just one of many ways you can choose to work with the DNG files. The tricky thing with working with RAW files is that every software interprets the metadata and the color matrix differently. It is in a way like working within a black box. In Resolve, I start off by importing my media. You could, if you want, and if you have a big project, do global settings under Project Settings and Camera Raw, but in this case, I'll choose Clip under the Camera Raw settings instead. I choose BMD and BMD film as my color space and my gamma. I make sure to check the highlight recovery and I bump the exposure by 2 steps. I create 4 nodes. In the OpenFX panel, they have a very nifty tool called Color Space Transform. I choose BMD and BMD film as my inputs for color space and gamma. As my outputs, I choose Rec 709 as my color space and Cineon as my gamma. In my second node, I fine-tune the exposure and I do a small primaries correction. The third node gets a power window with some small tweaks. In the fourth node, I place a film looks lookup table. And this would be the end result. But since most of you use Resolve on a day-to-day basis, I am going to focus on the more unusual Adobe Camera Raw workflow. As we could see, the ACR debayer is really good. The quickest workflow would be to import your files into Adobe After Effects and render your files here. As you can see, I have my DNG sequence and it consists of a series of images. When I'm in Adobe After Effects, I make sure I work within 32 bits and I make sure I have the Camera Raw sequence picked. You don't want your sequence imported as individual stills. We now get to the Adobe Camera Raw import controls. I do my basic adjustments to get to an image that I'm happy with. And I'll push this example a little bit further than I normally would, just to demonstrate the flexibility of the DNG files. One of the nicest things working within Adobe Camera Raw is the very fine control you have over noise reduction. You can see there's a small amount of color noise coming from the Sony FS700, but it's easily correctable. You can also do your usual adjustments you would do with your stills, and you can even correct for any chromatic aberrations that you might have. When you're done, you just drag your imported sequence to a new composition and you render to any format and flavor that you prefer. It's important to note that you could also do a Lightroom workflow and use a software like LR Timelapse to animate your developments and settings over time. Thank you for taking the time and watching this video on the Shogun and the new Cinema DNG recording. Please don't forget to submit any feedback that you might have to help make the Shogun Inferno, and the Shogun Flame even better. Thank you.